And Miss Jeanie is off playing with family today. We're on vacation, and I stayed back at our vacation space to do the show. Well, she went off with the family to do some playing. So delighted that you're with us. Our call-in number, if you have any questions for us, especially if you're listening on one of those stations where we can't see you on our control panel, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you'll be listening to the show live. And if you push 1, that will raise a hand in the control panel, and Jeanie will know, or I will know, that you want to talk to us. So welcome to the show. I'm hoping that all things are working properly here. I'm not used to this control panel. If somebody who's listening wouldn't mind sending me a quick text just to say, yes, you're on, loud and clear. Hopefully I am. Again, I'm not that familiar with the functioning of the switchboard. But it looks like I'm here. And all things are well. So, our call-in number again, 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you'll be listening to the show directly. And I'd love to say hello. And I'm looking at the switchboard, and I don't see any hands up at this moment. And so if you're out there in listener land, before we start to get into the material, because once I get into the material, I'm probably going to just rock with it and not be answering any questions. So if you're out there in listener land and you have a question for us, push 1. I am looking at the switchboard right now, and hopefully I'll know enough about it to answer your or put you online, and we'll have a conversation. And if all remains quiet, then I'm going to just jump right into the material that I have. We're going to continue to work with. Well, thank you, Celinda, for letting me know that I am on. I'm glad to hear that. I wasn't sure that I was properly connected, so I appreciate that, Celinda. And I'm going to just move right in then to the material that we were talking about on the book Thomas. And we're up to saying the book of Thomas, if you've been with it or if you haven't been with us and haven't been keeping up with what we're doing, it's one of the texts that was not canonized by the church. Or I don't even know if you want to really say the canonized books were done by the church, because it was akin that really played that game. So I'm not going to get into that one. In any event, we have this text reportedly written by Thomas, and Thomas, rather than writing a narrative as most of the other Gospels, actually took some of the key sayings, purportedly the secret teachings of the man named Yeshua, and those sayings down. So rather than being in a narrative form, it's a series of sayings. And I'm going to kind of go back and cover a couple of them to catch us up to where we are. And the first one, we're going to go to saying 38. And it purports that Yeshua said, "Many times you desired to hear these words, which I speak to you, and you have none other from you who you hear them." And I'll say that in 50 plus years of consciously, purposely, specifically searching for the truth of how do we heal, how do we function as whole human beings, and a significant number of years prior to that, engaged in the teachings of Yeshua. When it says there none other for you to hear them from. He's saying nobody else has the brain cells for what I'm offering you. And in my offering, especially when it comes to forgiveness, there's nowhere on the planet you're going to find this teaching. There's nowhere on the planet you're going to find anyone with the brain cells that can tell you exactly how forgiveness works. As far as I am aware, in my study, in my work, and I mean, I've presented to groups that were run by people of even some of the other world religions who were just flabbergasted when they saw what Aramaic forgiveness was, and that the Aramaic forgiveness process was that with which you removed from your mind and your physiology those energetic patterns that did not belong. And so Yeshua is saying, you've got nobody else to hear them from. And then he says, days will come when you'll seek after me and you won't find me. You're not going to find this available. And basically what I hear him saying in this saying 38 to those who he's working with. Remember, there's an earlier point that's recounted in the quote-unquote canonized scriptures where the regular, what we think of as the regular 12 disciples are there. And then there's another group, and it sounds like it's a fairly large group, and he gives them the command to do the inner work. Basically, they ask a question, what do we do to please the Creator? And he basically says, you function as a human being, and here's how you do it. Here's the work you do. You have to go in and you have to face your rage, your guilt, your grief, your pain, your drama, your trauma, your dishonesty, your denial, your projection, you're finding other people at fault. You got to deal with that. And if you remember, when he gave that instruction, a large number of his disciples left and never came back, and they left saying this. And it's no different today than it was 2,000 years ago. They left saying, too hard a saying. You mean I have to actually develop the skill and the ability to go inside myself and look at all of the unresolved dynamics of my generations? Too hard a saying. I'm out of here. Forget it. Just give me a drink and let me get out of here. And what Yeshua is saying here is, do your work now while I'm here to support you, because I'm not going to be here forever. I'm here to guide you. I'm here to help you to build the brain cells, is what he's saying. And then in saying 39, he talks about the Pharisees. He says, the Pharisees and the scribes have received these keys of knowledge, and they've hidden them. It's been buried. Now today, any aspect of churchianity that is not teaching people to go within and do their inner work would be the equivalent of the Pharisees and the scribes. Anybody who's not teaching people out of the churches to go inside themselves and do the work that Yeshua prescribed. And you'll listen and you hear many preachers say, well, there's nothing you can do. All you can do is believe. Well, don't believe for a minute that that person's about the work or the teachings of Yeshua, because Yeshua said, here's what you need to do. In fact, at one point he says, why do you come to me calling my name, calling me your master, and you don't do what I told you to do? And yet there are these scribes and Pharisees today that say, well, there's nothing you can do anyway. You're just a hopeless, helpless sinner. And that's all based on a fraud. That's all based on a lie. And Yeshua is acknowledging it was no different back then. He says the Pharisees, the scribes, they've received these keys and they've hidden them. They did not go in. And those who wanted to go in, they did not allow. But be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. And that's basically the modern equivalent of many so-called preachers are telling people. And that is, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. I mean, how many preachers have you heard say that? I remember I was in Lansing, Michigan back, this has got to be 37, 38 years ago. And there was a gentleman who was a member of the Kinsman Club. No, I believe it was the Kiwanis Club. And he'd asked me to come and speak, and I presented. And the preacher who did the invocation, did the blessing of the food. It was a lunchtime meeting. And the preacher who did the blessing just had some strange comments to make. And so I invited him to go to lunch, to get together afterward. And we sat down to talk. And I started to speak about the Aramaic words of Yeshua and what Yeshua actually said. And this guy had been what today we would call a fundamentalist preacher for 50 years. And he actually said to me, I don't care what Yeshua said. Well, he didn't use the word Yeshua. I don't care what Hail Zeus said. I have my Greek scriptures, and that's all I need to know. And if you don't have the Aramaic Yeshua in your mind, you don't have Yeshua. And what you have is what churchianity is purported to be, this religious figure who's above all and has a whole story to tell. And that doesn't even start to resemble the story that Yeshua told about himself or why he was there. So this saying 38 is basically, repeating what those who have voided Yeshua's teachings and replaced it with dogma and doctrine have done. Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. No, fear of God is totally and completely ignoring the work of Yeshua, and it is one of the scribes and the Pharisees removing the keys of knowledge from the people that they're talking to. And then statement 40. Yeshua says, a vine was planted apart from the Father, and since it is not established, it will be pulled up by its roots and destroyed. What's he saying? In essence, what that statement is offering us is that you can seem to be growing in knowledge, but if your knowledge is not linked to, is not rooted in being, if your knowledge is not rooted in love, then I don't care how much it grows, how smart you get, how much science you understand, it's going to be destroyed. Because the only thing that has the underpinning of permanence is that which flows from that connected space of love. And as Dr. Tim said on that show, and it was kind of fun to hear the voices on that show as they talked about whyakin.com. That was back in the early days of doing this work. Well, our website was still whyakin.com. It is not whyakin.com. It is now whyakin.org. And the Angel Radio Network was a network we originally, and then we shifted over and did our own Mundshifters radio show. So it was kind of fun to listen to that. And so, as he speaks about this vine being planted, if you're not rooted in that of the world, or in the world that is permanent, then you will be uprooted. If you don't have your bases in truth, and as Dr. Tim said at the end of his presentation, hold a newborn child. If you haven't had the opportunity to do that, and we're blessed right now. Our grandson has now been circling the earth for going into his 7th week, and so I've gotten to sit many hours in the last few days, just being with this presence of love. And you'll remember that saying that we uncovered. Yeshua said, "If you don't know what life is about, go ask the little ones, go ask the newborn." They haven't been tainted yet. The resonance of the world has not yet brought out of their carbon-based memory the generational patterns, so the purity of being is still there. You want to make sure that whatever your endeavor is aiming toward, that its beginning and its end, the Alpha and the Omega, are based in permanence. And the only permanent thing is that of active present love. So there's only one energy that will feed you the truth. And that energy is based in that presence of love. And so you want to make sure that you're rooted in that permanence. You're rooted in that eternal essence that is literally your very nature. And it is being rooted in that. If you've gotten lost in the world, if you've gotten trapped in the world of hostility and fear and rage and grief and trauma and drama, it is by going back to bringing love conscious, active, and present, which literally is your newborn state and mine and everyone else's. And I don't care who we're talking about. I don't care if you're talking about Hitler or whoever it is. The root of being is the same for every one of us. That's why it's true that, here we are on the punishment planet that says, well, all you have to do is punish people enough and then you'll get them into goodness. You look at the penal colonies of the world. You look at the idea of penance. The church gives us this penance thing. Well, here, go suffer, then you'll return to love. Well, good luck on that one. That's not rooted in being. No one has ever deserved to be punished. No child has ever been deserved having a person with an energy of some form of hostility in their minds, turning their eyes and giving them the look. No child has ever deserved that. No child has ever deserved a raised voice. But those who as children got that look and got that raised voice try to use that power person dynamic instilled in them to control the next generation. And facing that is, as that group said, it's such a hard saying. I have to face that. I have to wade through that. I have to free myself of that to get back to that total state of being. Yes, because it is only that state of being, it is only that active presence of love that will feed you the truth and will feed your soul, feed your being. Statement 41. Yeshua says, he who has in his hand, to him it shall be given. And he who has not, from him shall be taken even the little that he has. Well, when you look at that one on its face, and that one shows up in the traditional translation of the scriptures, you look at that one and you say, well, what do you mean? If he has not, how could anything be taken? He has not. What he's saying here is, as Dr. Tim said at the end of his show, spend the time finding that original state of being in yourself. And when you have that, then everything that you want in the external world will be added to you. If you do not have that, then somebody can come along and pile and pile and pile on you all the things you say you want, and you will find a way to destroy it. If you look into stories about people who've, say, for instance, won the lottery, people who were in poverty and won the lottery, millions and millions of dollars. And in a very short period of time, those people who had those millions of dollars are broke again. They're back in poverty. Because they did not have the mind energy that comes from being of abundance, because they had the mind energy of poverty and had no idea how to forgive that. But if someone came and handed it to them, it would be taken away from them. And in essence, from that state of being, you build in you the brain cells. You remember Yeshua said, in order for his teachings to be meaningful to you, you had to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. You've got to have the brain cells. If you don't have the same brain cells for a word that Yeshua had, then if you listen to that word and it resonates different brain cells and your listening comes from your brain, you can't match what he's saying, and therefore you can't experience what he's saying you can experience. That's why you have to be careful about who you engage with these teachings. The objective of Yeshua's work was to give each person the platform in which to have, not a platform from which to admire Yeshua's personal experience, but a platform from which to have their own personal experience personally experienced. But if you don't have the eyes to see and the ears to hear that he had, then your mind's listening will feed you something different than what he says, and his instructions will be destroyed. So if you've got the brain cells, if it's in you, then when you hear instructions with which to go deeper, you'll have a place to receive them and be able to follow those instructions. You remember in another place in the scriptures, they talked about strength to strength, here a little, there a little. Stammering lips and another tongue will I speak to you, the scriptures say. You'll remember in the book on the end of suffering, Yeshua corrects that little misnomer in there, where the character talking to Yeshua says, wait a minute, why would the Creator speak to us with stammering lips and another tongue? And Yeshua says, no, remember, everybody writing that stuff down, most everybody was locked into the one world universal religion of blame. What they didn't know is they were listening with foreign brain cells, with foreign eyes and foreign ears to the truth. If you've got hostility or fear in your mind, you will find a way for Yeshua's teachings on love to become about hostility and fear. Punishment, inquisitions, burning at the stake. You'll find ways to justify all of that, not because anything like that ever came from Yeshua's mouth, but those who are the brain cells they listen to go, oh, I'm supposed to punish if someone doesn't do what God instructs them to do. And if I don't punish them, God will. If I don't judge them, God will. And we hear Yeshua standing with this woman who's clearly, in the world's terms, guilty as hell. What does he say to her? First of all, he gets rid of all the accusers very skillfully by letting them know that they were all dealing with their own projections. He says, okay, whoever hasn't got this kind of sin, cast first stone. Go ahead. You start throwing the stones. And everybody, being honest with themselves, had to leave because they were functioning. Their pointing a finger at her was their projection on her of what they had done. And he called them on that, and they all disappeared. And he tells the woman, you're off base. Sin, remember, is an energy that's off the mark. That's all it means. It's an archery term that means off the mark. He says to the woman, don't do it anymore. Stop it. By the way, where are all your accusers? And she's, I can imagine she had a big grin on her face, like, I don't know where they are, but thanks, buddy. You got rid of them. So people who are still in punishment mode, who are not functioning toward themselves or others from a space of conscious, active, present love, he's saying, I can hand it to you and you'll lose it. That parable of the seed that fell on barren ground. The ground that produces fruit, that allows a seed to grow, is that which is based in conscious, active, present love. Then the brain cells for truth will grow in you, and more will be added to you. But if you don't have those brain cells, if that's not the ground that this falls on, if the total, complete 1,000% truth were put in one paragraph and put in front of your eyes, you would not be able to read that paragraph with any form of comprehension. So if you don't have the brain cells, if you haven't done the work, if what you're filled with is all kinds of hostility, fear, self-condemnation, etc., then even if truth were just put right in your lap, it'll disappear. It'll be destroyed. Then saying 42. And this was really so short and so straightforward. You go, well, what the heck does that mean? Why would he say this? Saying 42 is passers-by. What does that mean? Oh, how many times in listening to the radio show have you heard me offer become the thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feelings, the actor apart from the actions? Become the observer. So when he says become passersby, remember he says, I am in this world, but I'm not of it. Nothing in the way of mind energy that is sourced by the world has any control over me whatsoever, he says, because I have a different set of brain cells. That stuff has no place to land in me. There's nothing that would incline me toward what the world, remember that section where, Satan takes him out into the mountain and said, look, I'm going to give all this to you. And he's like, of your world. Your world's energetic patterns do not source anything in me. I am sourced from my connection to active present love. That's the state we're each invited to achieve. So as you become the passerby, as you step back, and you are the thinker apart from your own thoughts, if there's anything based in hostility or fear that you have that would take away truth from you, you will apply forgiveness and remove it. And then you invest in your true purpose and life. And you fulfill only that which keys into. And as you align with that higher energy, as you throw out and forgive everything and anything based in any form of hostility, fear, sadness, rage, grief, condemnation, gossip, slander, vengeance, as you alleviate yourself of those energies, then you too will say, oh, I'm just a passerby here. This is not what I'm invested in. Yes, I am in this world, but there's nothing in me that resonates with the hostility and fear-based instructions in this world. Therefore, I am not of it. It can't run me. So let your source be the presence of love and make your most earnest endeavor that of functioning from love. Otherwise, carbon-based memory, perceptual mind will lead you astray. If your primary and number one objective is other than Rachma, other than to have the gateway in you open for conscious active present love to flow through you, if anything else is of interest to you, then carbon-based memory is going to grab a hold of it. It's going to twist you around its little finger, and you'll be led in the opposite direction of where you're designed to go. The world will always have 1,000 excuses. Well, look what they did. Of course they deserve my screaming and raging at them. Of course they deserve my shutting down love in me and ignoring them. Of course they deserve my expressions of rage and condemnation. I mean, certainly, just because Yeshua wouldn't condemn, it must be my job. And you'll notice how many of those Pharisees are still talking about how, in the end times, then he'll come to judge the living and the dead. The guy said, thanks, but I'm not judging anybody. Again, to the woman who was clearly, quote unquote, guilty in the world's eyes, he said, neither do I condemn thee. And that's just not in his job description. And for those who've been threatened with, and he's coming back to condemn you, it's a lie. That's a pharisaical lie. So make your most earnest endeavor to have that condition of Rachma in your mind. And whenever your mental illness shows up, and anything unlike love, when you realize that the purpose of your body-mind unit is that of the expression of love, a space for love to incarnate and express through, then recognize that anything other than that is an aberrant energy that needs to be forgiven. Because if you let yourself grab onto it, carbon-based memory will come up with stories that will engage you forever. So be the observer of what's happening in your life. And if something is strong enough to come up and grab you by the face and suck you in, and imagine right now, it's like I've got my hand in my face and the fingers are tight and locked and holding on tight. The only objective at that point is to peel the fingers off. The only objective at that point is to free yourself of the frequencies of hostility and fear so that you can return to the presence of love that you are and make sure that that's what's fueling your life. I know personally that I found it to be very helpful for me in my own process because each of our minds can always justify why we're doing what we're doing. But whenever it was a big advance for me, whenever my mind served up some form of hostility or fear, I would say to myself, this is my mental illness. Hostility or fear, you moving in a mind that's designed for conscious, active, present love, is a mental illness. You must own your own mental illness, moment to moment to moment, sometimes 10 times in a minute to free yourself of it, because you've got 1,000 justifications. Listen to what he said. Look at what he did. Look what they did. Look how they're acting. Certainly they deserve this from me. Well, you know what? Maybe somebody out there is such a terrible person that they deserve your rage, your condemnation, the look you give them, the way you degrade them, the way you hold them as lesser because they don't understand like you do. Maybe they deserve that. But the real question is, do you deserve that energy? Because remember, you get the original, they just get a carbon copy. Statement 43. And he says, who art thou that thou shouldst say these things? Yeshua says to them, from what I say to you, you do not understand who I am. But you have become as the Jews, for they love the tree and hate its fruit, and they love the fruit and hate the tree. So in essence, what he's saying is, my words reveal you can only see and hear me if you have the brain cells and have done the work that I prescribed. And without the brain cells, you will be confused. You'll always find something to blame. And in this case, he uses a metaphor of the fruit of the tree and the tree itself. You want to be the space of love for both the cause and the effect of everything. That you maintain that. And if confusion comes up, you recognize that confusion is just another state of mind where there's your work to be done. And when you own your own confusion, confusion is a mental illness. It is a mind not working properly. And some people say, well, Michael, mental illness, that's something in the world that, you can't talk about. Yeah, I can talk about that. If your mind is not plugged into and functioning as love, you have a mental illness. If my mind is confused, is not functioning as love, I have a mental illness. And when I can own that, I can start to clean up and get rid of my mental illness. One of the reasons why those in mental illness are stuck there is because they can't own what they're doing to themselves. They can't own what's going on. The first step in changing it is being able to own it. And I'm not talking about some kind of an odd definition of mental illness. I mean a literal mental illness. This mind is not working properly if it is not connected to love, period. The statement Yeshua is basically saying, you can only see and hear me if you've got the brain cells and are engaging in the work that I've shared with you. And saying 44 is an interesting one. And you got to have the brain cells for it to make sense of it. First off, he says, he who blasphemes against the Father will be forgiven. i.e., you won't be held accountable if you speak against the Creator. And who blasphemes against the Son, me, will be forgiven. And blaspheme here simply means to speak against. But he says, he or she who blasphemes against Ruka de Kudsha, what the Greeks translate as the Holy Spirit, will not be forgiven, either on heaven or on earth, in heaven or on earth. What does that mean? Remember that Ruka de Kudsha in Aramaic, which quite literally is the breath, it is the greatest sacrament that exists in all the world, is in Aramaic defined as the feminine elemental force that undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth, the denial of which leaves you in unforgiveness. So what he's saying is, in order for forgiveness, in order for the removal of energetic patterns that don't belong in you, this power, the breath, Ruka de Kudsha, has to be active. And if you're in denial of it, if you shut it down, then you will not experience forgiveness. That is, you will not experience the release from the root energies of hostility or fear that your mind has you locked into. Because when you deny that, you're separated from the very power that does the work of cleaning up your own mind. I can remember the time when it really, really struck, really hit home with me. Jeanie and I were this was probably about 7 or 8 years ago, and we were in South Florida speaking at a church in Miami. And I'm up there and I'm talking about Ruka de Kudsha. And that's where the real connection, that Ruka de Kudsha, when you listen to the Aramaic scriptures, it doesn't say the Creator sent out His Spirit. It says the Creator sent out its breath. And I can see myself. I was standing up in front of. They had probably 400 or 500 people there, and it was just a moment of insight of, oh, that's it. The denial of the breath, the holding of the breath, is what leaves us in unforgiveness. And I had this visual of, the real purpose of a church, what we should be doing. And I had this visual of these people all working together, breathing each other. The real sacrament is that of allowing the flow of breath to move through you, undoing everything that never belonged in you, undoing every block and realigning your structure to a complement to produce the full flow of energy in and through you that you're designed for. And when that full flow, when that full vitality is reached, then all energetic patterns based in hostility or fear will quite literally be blown off. You'll be freed of them. But the reason he's talking about being in denial of this power, means that you're separated through the denial of it from the very power that will heal you. That's why he's saying if you blaspheme, if you speak against it, if you say, nah, that's crazy. No, I don't want anything to do with that. It's like, an example, you want to go on a trip, you get the car all ready, you get the car all packed, you get over to the gas station and you say, I really want to go on this trip and the gas tank is empty and we've got 500 miles, so I really want to go, but I don't want any of that gas. Nah, don't put gas in my car. Well, if the very thing that's going to take you where you want to go, you're in denial of. And here he's saying it's not me, and it's not the Creator. It's Ruka de Kudsha. That connects you with the power that will heal you. So let's just take a moment with that thought and notice what's happening with your breath. And you'll notice when we're doing one-on-one processing with someone how often I ask the question, what's happening with your breath? And you'll notice invariably when I ask that question, the person we're talking with isn't breathing. Literally, by holding the breath, we stop the flow of mind energy within our structure. If there's something that is so intense that I just can't stand feeling it, and I don't breathe through it, I'm going to be stuck in it. And you watch people when things start to move that they don't want to deal with. And what do? They hold their breath. They stop the flow of ruka dekucha, the denial of what the Greeks called the Holy Spirit. That's exactly what it is. It's not some mysterious, far-out thing. It's right here. It's right now. So we say we just take 3 or 4 connected breaths together. Let's just allow yourself to get centered and focused, whatever's moving in your physiology, and take a breath. When you get to the top of that inhale, just let the breath drop out of you. Exhale. Take a breath. The restoration of ruka dekucha. Breathing with you. And then saying 45. Interesting, we're just about in time with the clock. It's 44 minutes to. Yeshua says, they do not gather grapes from thorns, nor pluck figs from camel thistles. They do not yield fruit. A good man brings forth a good thing from his treasure. Where's your treasure? What did they say? The treasure is in the heart. What is the heart? It's the unconscious. As a good man brings forth good things from his treasure, a bad man will bring forth evil things from his evil treasure, which is in his heart, and say evil things. For out of the abundance of the heart brings forth evil things. Now, let's be clear about that word evil, because the Greeks have put a lot of baggage around that one. In Aramaic, remember, I'm on the archery range, and I pull back my bow, and I fire, and I miss the target. Pardon me, I miss the bullseye. That's sin, off the mark. But if I miss the target altogether, what the scorekeeper would yell would be evil. So if I'm way off the mark with the energy that I'm engaging in, I'm now trapped or stuck in what was called evil. So you will know them by their fruit, but much more important, because you, like me, were probably brought up as a very devout member of the one world universal religion of blame, and you knew everything was going on inside of you. When you walked away from a conflict, you walked away talking about the other guy, because of course it was all their fault. If only they had, and why did they, and they shouldn't have, and this is how they are, no. Who's holding their breath? Who's gotten locked in? What's the fruit that I have going on here? So another way to say this might be, if you bring forth mental illness, if your mind, and your mind will give you 1,000 justifications and show you 1,000 pictures of 1,000 other things that are the reason you're doing it, but notice that you're the one who's doing it again. We are designed to function as conscious act to present love with each other. That's all. And if you're bringing forth any other fruit than that, then own the fact that you have a mental illness. Step back from it. Be the observer. Become the thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feeling, the actor apart from the actions. Admit it. And then dig out a worksheet and forgive it. Your mind will sit there and tell you, well, you just need to figure this out. Forget about figuring it out. You don't need to figure out anything. If you've got some form of hostility and fear moving in you, you've got forgiveness work to do. Admit it. Oh, but Michael, look what they did. I don't care what they did. Have you lost the presence of active love in your mind? Then dogma has been shut down, and either fear or hostility is moving. You need restoration. Yes, do they need restoration? Do they have a whole list of problems? And can you tell me the whole list? Probably. But guess what? That's none of your damn business what they've got to do. If you're in a conflict and you walk away talking about them, you're in denial, dissociation, and projection. If you're in a conflict and you walk away from that conflict talking to yourself about yourself and what your healing is, you're now on track. Own it. Face it. Admit it. And then dig out a worksheet and forgive it. Remove that energy from your structure. So in essence, what he's saying is if you're functioning as a human being, and he says, they do not gather grapes from thorns. If you're functioning as a human being, you cannot produce an hostile word, an hostile thought, an hostile feeling. You can't do it. You can only do that from a hostile mind. So he says, you do not gather grapes from thorns. You don't take figs from camel thistles. It can't happen. If it's happening, guess who has a problem? You do. Yes, I know you've got a story about how it's all about them, but you're the one producing the fruit. If the only thing you have in your store is a good treasure, then even for the person who has all the problems that you've described and all that you're saying about them is true, what you'll do is stand there and be the space of conscious, active, present love for them. But if they resonate something in you that is evil, that is totally off the target, then you'll bring forward from your store of those energies that are off the target all sorts of condemnation and blame. What if you possessed a mind that no matter what happens in your world, your mind could not produce any form of fear or hostility? Wow, what would that be like? No matter what this person in front of you does, that you stay connected to active present love. Now, the average person says, well, I do stay connected to love, except when this person comes along and they start saying things like this. Guess what that person is? That person is your biggest gift. They're showing you the hidden part of your mind that you're in denial of, and you try to pretend doesn't belong to you. And the reason you're experiencing it is because it does belong to you. Even though you take all the energies behind it and you make up pictures of other people and you believe that it's all about them. It's time to give that up. Time to be done with it. So once again, take a moment. Allow yourself to just take a few deep breaths. And just tap in within yourself. And as you take yourself those deep connected breaths, recognize and remember the active presence of love in you. And I'm breathing with you. Perhaps some things have been stirred in this last 45 or 50 minutes. And if so, then I'm going to invite you to simply go inside yourself, breathing deeply. And as you look within yourself as you breathe, notice there inside of you are trillions of lights, trillions of cells. Each one at its core holds a light. And allow that light to expand in each cell. As you breathe, intensify the light in each of those trillions of cells in your structure. And actually visualize each cell with that light in it, and that light expands beyond the borders of the cell itself until those trillions of lights connect into one powerful light in you. Breathe and experience that state of self-approval. And breathe. And see that light expanding out beyond your own form. Those trillions of lights expanding, joining, and moving out literally from beyond your physiology. And as you look within, allow yourself to become aware of the light that is in each person that is around you. Allow yourself to become aware of that light strengthening in them. That the fact that you've chosen to strengthen this presence of light and love within you sets up a field that's literally through resonance strengthens the presence of light and love in each person that surrounds you. Even the person who perhaps has been the one who's shown you and challenged you by showing you the parts of your mind that you refuse to become acquainted with. And allow yourself to breathe and become acquainted with those parts of your own mind. And see literally your whole neighborhood. Because you've chosen light, it strengthens the presence of that light in every person in your neighborhood. And you breathe deeply with that light, because you are that light. You remember that Yeshua said, I am the light of the world. And then the only word he changed in speaking that differently was the pronoun I, and he said, you. You are the light of the world. And breathe. You truly are the presence of light. And strengthens the light in each person that you touch. And each person becomes the light of the world. Breathing deeply, feeling the presence of love in every cell of your physiology. You see in your community expanding out, literally to touch your city and every person in it. And with the breath, you flow of more and more of that presence of love through you. And as that strengthens in every person in the city you're in, or the community that you're in, see that strengthening light expanding out to cover the whole state. And that presence of love, that presence of light, touching millions of minds, expands out and spills out beyond the borders of your state to surrounding states, to the whole of these United States. And whatever community you're in, if you're in Australia, if you're in Poland, if you're in Sweden, you expand that light and it spills out to 7.5 billion minds on the planet and touches every one of them. Truly, you are the light of the world. It's a delight, an honor, and a privilege to be spending time with you. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It is an